Hi, welcome everyone. In particular, warm welcome to Mount Kelly students that I believe are joining us, are going to be watching, and thank you for giving me the opportunity, and Adam for arranging it, to say just a few words about a very complex issue surrounding the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinians. So, just by way of introduction, very briefly, I know time is short. My name is Rabbi Hackenbrock, and I am the senior rabbi of Woodside Park, a large community in northwest London. I've been involved in interfaith work. I'm passionate about it, trying to bring people together of different faiths, of different cultures, of different perspectives. The only way forward for us all is to be able to learn to celebrate what we have in common and to respect the differences between the different faiths and different peoples. That is what I believe, and that is the only way forwards. And you're never going to win and have a outright winner. Both sides are here to stay, both the Palestinians and the Israelis, and therefore it is imperative that there is dialogue between the two. So what is the Israeli right to being in the land of Israel in the first place? That's the first question I've been asked to discuss. Well, it goes way back to the time of the Bible, over 3,300 years ago. Already Joshua, who succeeded Moses, led the Jewish people into the promised land, and they settled the 12 tribes of Israel, and they settled there, and they stayed there as the indigenous population, the natives, the same way as in America you have the Native Americans, and in Britain, in England, you have the English, which are the indigenous population. So it is in Israel, we were the indigenous native population. Of course, we didn't have the opportunity to stay in the land because of the various empires that one after the other took over the land of Israel, along with many other surrounding countries. So, for example, we were conquered by the Babylonians, we were conquered by the Romans, by the Byzantines, by the Persians, by the Greeks, by the Ottomans, by everyone has conquered the land of Israel, the promised land. But in 1948, as a result of the UN resolution, it was agreed that there would be a division of the British mandate in the land, and there would be part of it would be for the Israel, for the Jewish people, and part of it would be for the Arabs, for the Palestinians. That was the arrangement. So I'm going to fast forward. There is much more to say about that. So why did this conflict that is exceptionally regrettable, why did it erupt right now? Well, the truth is that, as you may be aware, every few years there has always been, for well over a decade, if not much longer, there has been trouble in the region, in particular between Gaza and Israel. I actually visited Gaza before it was handed back, and it was a beautiful place. Regrettably, the Palestinians are being ruled and have been ruled for over a decade by Hamas, which is recognized internationally as a terrorist organization, like Hezbollah. Okay, no different to Hezbollah. It is a terrorist organization that the United States and many other nations refuse to deal with because it is terrorist. And therefore, of course, that complicates things because it is exceptionally difficult to speak and to negotiate and to have any type of real relationship with a terrorist state, which is the way it is, regrettably, at the moment. That doesn't mean that we don't have tremendous sympathy with the Palestinian people themselves. And of course, every person we respect and we see as a human being who we only want the very best for, and that is both for the Israeli side, but also for the Palestinian side. So this started, this current conflict that we have seen over the last week started in a very confined area of East Jerusalem where there was a civil conflict that's been going on for many years over 8 houses and the ownership of those 8 houses. And basically there was a court ruling and things got out of control. And what happens time and again is an isolated incident. It becomes politicized. And therefore, rather than it staying in as a civil matter, it became politicized. Hamas saw this as an opportunity to flex their muscles. And from there, they encouraged Al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, for their followers there to protest with throwing stones over the Western Wall, which is where Jewish worshippers were, and things spiraled out of control. The police had to try to quell the protest, and one thing led to another, and of course, rockets started to be fired from Gaza into Israel. They were asked to desist, they didn't, and eventually Israel had no choice but to retaliate. So that is how things spiraled. But what happened, and what happens time and again, is everyone looks at what happens. They don't look at the context, why things are happening. We're looking at one little piece of the jigsaw, one isolated incident, which you cannot possibly, as you all know, having studied history, you cannot possibly have any context or any meaning to anything that goes on in life if you don't look at all the events and all the players involved in any type of story. So that, of course, is just a snippet. The social media and the West got hold of it, and the politicians and everyone got involved, and it became a massive conflict, and things have really spiraled out of control. So Israel was forced to defend its citizens from the rockets that were being fired over at its innocent civilians, and it went from backwards and forwards between the two. So the question, Israel has been accused and been questioned as to whether its response is fair and proportionate. Okay, and I am, of course, not dealing with any of these matters in detail because of the confines of time. I'm just touching on them, and of course I'm sure you'll explore them and look into them, and that is all I want to show you today, that the issues are very complex, and there is not one side to the story, the Palestinian side, there's not two sides to the story, the Israeli side. There are always at least 3 sides to every story, and sometimes even more. So, keep an open mind whenever you hear or see any images or any stories. Everyone has biases, and we have to keep our biases in check to truly understand what's going on. So every sovereign state has a duty to defend its citizens. And therefore, as we already said, missiles are coming over, attacking a sovereign state. How would any sovereign state respond? Well, imagine if the Isle of Wight started, its citizens, for whatever reason, started firing missiles across at England. After a while, having made requests to desist, if they didn't, England would have to defend its citizens. There would be uproar, and they would have to deflect and to defend from the oncoming missiles. Well, that is the position that Israel has had to deal with. And the reason why it became so complicated is because the way that Hamas is fighting this battle in a very cowardly fashion is, as a terrorist organization, it chooses, despite breaking UN resolutions, it hides behind innocent civilians as using children and women as a human shield, and then it fires missiles across at Israel at its civilians. Now, Israel, when it tries to, when it is forced to retaliate and to defend its country, it will try to pinpoint exactly where they have intelligence, where the Hamas operatives are, and then rather than just retaliate immediately, they will do several things. They will send caller, all of those on their mobile phones in the buildings where they are about to fire at the Hamas terrorists, and they will say to any of the civilians, get out, because in 5 minutes we are going to drop a bomb on that building. If that doesn't work and they don't respond, or they may be out, they may not hear their phones, they drop leaflets. They also do what's called dropping a dummy bomb on the rooftops, and all these measures are done to ensure that that Israel does as much as possible to avoid civilian casualties. It is inevitable when terrorists are choose to hide behind innocent civilians, that sooner or later, regrettably, there are going to be civil casualties. And the loss of life is something that is exceptionally regrettable. It is painful, and every loss of life on either side we see as a loss of a world. But we find ourselves in a very, very difficult situation on both sides, and there are not going to be any winners out of this. Not Israel, not Hamas, not the Palestinians, not the Israelis. The only way, and in short, I just want to finish off because I know I was given only 10 minutes. The only way forward is to leave the politicians and the celebrities out of this equation, because they're not helping things. They're just adding fuel to the fire. And for the people, at the grassroots, for everyone to facilitate conversation, let them sit down. Let everyone sit and have conversation and focus on what we have in common. At the end of the day, Jews and Arabs lived side by side for centuries. They are cousins. They have so much in common in their past, and please God, in the future. And our prayers, and I'm sure your prayers, are that there should be peace, an end of this conflict, and please God, a way forward of dialogue and understanding and mutual respect between all the factions and fractions. Wishing you and your school well, and thank you for allowing me to speak for these few minutes with you. All the very best.